The Game of Zen explores the often overlooked ways in which professional, personal, and spiritual growth are interrelated. We dive deep into the life teachings of the Buddha and the mindfulness practices of Zen, revealing how they can help us dramatically expand our possibilities for wholehearted work, life, and play.
Hello, and welcome to a new episode of the Game of Zen podcast. My name is Scott Berman, checking in from Philadelphia, PA. As always, I'm joined by my good friend, Sensei Paul. What's going on out there in Boulder today?
Hey, Scott, good to see you again. It's been a good summer. You know, things are heating up and just kind of enjoying life with the family.
Nice. Yeah, it's been hot here too, and it's really been nice out here. We've been getting a lot of good weather, a lot of hiking going on, a lot of beach time. So it's always fun out here on the East Coast. And so we had an Independence Day, happy July 4th, happy birthday, USA. We've got a big one coming up next year, our 250th. So today's episode, we're going to focus on independence and self-empowerment. And I know you got a lot of good stuff to say about this, Paul. And so I wanted to start off with a quote that you put out in your newsletter about the Buddha. And it says, "There's no way to gain emancipation through another person." I think that's a very powerful quote. And let's start there. What does that mean?
Yeah, I think what it means is that it's pointing to the fact that we typically give up our power to other people and to externals, to circumstances, when we're so concerned about what they think, what they're doing, what things are happening in the world. You know, our kind of obsession with having things go our way and trying to control things in order to go our way. It appears to us to be an exercise of our power in order to do that, and of course, you know, some people live by that mantra of increasing, you could say, worldly power. But ultimately, that's really giving up power to externals. The real emancipation, the real power, the real independence is found in discovering the native, you know, our native genius, our native power, our native ability to create the immense power that we have to influence ourselves, our lives, other people, other lives, that is within, and it's intrinsic, you know, to our own consciousness, to our own being, to our own bodies. That's basically what that means.
I think it's interesting how that changes as you age. You know, when you're young, you're influenced a lot by your family, and then you go to school, and then your school friends, and then you get into college, and then you're in the workforce, and it might be your boss or your coworkers. And so over time, there's different people that are affecting your thinking, you know, affecting your thoughts about yourself. And I wonder, how do you, over time, how do you get better at dealing with that? And does age help or not?
It usually does, and it can, if we, you know, I think that is what wisdom is. It's learning, you know, learning the wisdom of the things that we can control and things that we can't. And I think life naturally does present that to us. So we're to surrender, and then we're to exercise our own influence. So I've found that to be the case as I get older, is that we, you know, let that go. But it can also be that, you know, we may aggregate more power, you know, say financial power and influence over people as we get older. And so it could go in the other direction. You know, we could get the wrong messages. And of course, there's a lot of politicians and business leaders who've taken that the wrong way. And they've gotten seduced by the power that they actually have been given in the external world. And that has inflated their egos. And so we have, you know, this culture of narcissism at the highest dimensions of power. So there are perils in success, you could say.
Yeah. And I also think the way our society is set up now, especially with the internet and social media, where other people's opinions give us validation on our lives. And a classic example is the Instagram like. Putting up a post on, oh, I got 30 likes, I got 50 likes, and getting that validation from strangers on your social posts is like dopamine for a lot of people. And their opinion of your photo or what you put out there sometimes can affect your own attitude about yourself. And I think that's not good. It's nice to be putting stuff out and sharing it with your friends and family and people, but at the same time, I think sometimes you tend to overrate what's coming back to you, right?
Definitely so. Scott, I'd say it's like dopamine to everybody.
Yeah.
Me included.
Yeah.
When I put a newsletter out and I get, a bunch of views, I feel it. I feel it in my body. I've got that little dopamine spike or oxytocin, whatever it is. That's that connection, that regard. I feel that in my body. And to be attached to that feeling, that's giving up power, right?
Yes.
To have that craving for it and that judgment or belief system that's actually meaningful in some way, that's giving up my power. So what we want is independence and emancipation from the reliance and attachment to that very pleasurable feeling.
Yes. And I think about it a lot, and I try not to put a lot of emphasis on it, but there's something else. I'll just admit this to you. I put up a post on Father's Day with me and my daughters, and I got a whole bunch of likes on it. And like a lot of friends checked in, oh, happy Father's Day. But there was one person, and I won't go into it, but there's one person that I didn't like react to it. And I was looking for, and I'm like, oh, I got 100 people say, this is great. And then this one person didn't do anything. And I'm like, why is that bothering me? Like, and I looked like the next couple of days, I'm like, did she like my, and I'm like, it doesn't matter, but as much as I told myself it doesn't matter, I still went on there and looked for that name on there.
That's right.
So I still get caught up in it. And even though I know I shouldn't do that.
It's so important to notice that kind of mismatch, right? It's like it's not really objective. It's and the studies, show that we kind of hear negative criticism 4 times more than positive criticism. But in your case, it's like, that one person who you really wanted, it's like that means everything. And it almost counteracts, all the positives you had. So we're, our minds are very strange beasts.
I know. You could say that again. The monkey mind. There's a monkey in my mind, and it's running all day long.
Yes.
But I was thinking also about Independence Day, and of course, as you guys may know, I live right near Valley Forge, and I was hiking out there, and I was thinking about the fact that we decided as a country we did not want to be ruled by the British. We didn't want to have a king. George Washington gave up his presidency, after 2 terms. And I was thinking about how sometimes you have to say that they're wrong. And we know how we want to live. We don't want to live like that. And we have to break away from negative influences on ourselves. So instead of saying, we're happily British subjects and we're just going to go on being like a colony of the British, we were like, no, we want to have our own country and our own laws. And I think from a personal standpoint and talk in terms of empowerment, I think it's important that you do that same thing internally with other people in your life.
Yeah, I think so. I think there's there's a concept of sovereignty, which is really important. So we throw around these words like freedom, independence, sovereignty, emancipation, liberation. They're all connected, but they kind of mean different things. And to have sovereignty is the most important thing, right? Is to have that ability to be agentic and within oneself, and to decide to make. Now that doesn't mean that you're not dependent on some others or externals for certain things, right? So Thich Nhat Hanh has this term interdependence. It really comes from the Buddhist tradition, but he really made it popular. Interdependence. So we go from dependence to independence to interdependence. Mm-hmm. That's actually the most, I think, in accord with reality, view of what's happening. That's at the national level and at the individual, you could say, egoic level, personal level. So the trick or the goal, I think, is to find sovereignty within in interdependence, right?
Yeah.
To be agentic, but not to say that, oh, we're an island, I'm not going to depend on anybody for anything. That's just not the way the world works.
Right.
And yeah.
I also think so. We always talk about how this is professional and personal life. These rules and these practices apply to both. And I was thinking about in business and work, you can't be completely independent of what's going on at your company. Or if a boss tells you something that you don't want to do, you have to do it. Or if you have an employee that is not behaving properly, you have to deal with it. And so I wanted to actually talk to you about some things that are in your newsletter. You quoted something from the Zen master Kosho Roshi, and it was 6 qualities to avoid in order to be successful. So I'm going to read these, and I'd love to hear your comments. First is opportunism, then passivity, dependence upon others, arrogance, lack of concentration, and accepting what others say uncritically. So what was he talking about, and how did those things help you in your business endeavors?
Yeah, let me give you a context for that. Uchiyama Roshi is a very wonderful 20th century Japanese Zen master. And he had commentary on Master Dogen's instructions to the cook, which is kind of a beautiful, powerful Zen text on applying Zen principles to work. Right. So it's the cook is like one of the major roles, work roles in a monastery. And it's considered one of the highest like teaching posts when to do the work, with the right mind. So this observation from Uchiyama Roshi came out in the context of a commentary on that text about how we work, right? How we bring Zen mind to work. And he observed these 2 Japanese businessmen who, in the work world, talking about what are the best principles for business. And they were these, and Uchiyama said, yeah, this is Zen, what these guys are talking about. So that's kind of the context of it. So opportunism, right? That's you're looking out on the world in a very transactional way, looking for opportunity to take advantage of. Right now, opportunism is kind of looking for an unfair advantage, looking for opportunities in a kind of an exploitative way, right? That's what they mean. They don't mean looking for good business opportunities. Opportunism means, looking for ways to exploit a situation. Okay, that's what I would describe that as. Okay, so if your mindset is like that, that's where your energy is going. That's where your attention is going. You're looking for ways to exploit the world, to take advantage of it. You're now a slave to the world presenting you with opportunities for you to take advantage of. Okay. Passivity is the next one. All right. If you're passive, you're basically relying upon the world to motivate, to do action, to take action. In your favor, your benefit. Okay, so that's another thing to avoid. Which my observation was that all of these apply to sovereignty, right? And how all of these actually impact our sovereignty, dependence upon others. Okay, that one is an easy one that goes without saying. If we're excessively dependent upon others, excessively reliant upon others, we've given up our sovereignty. Arrogance. Okay, arrogance. That's kind of an interesting one, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's oftentimes a fine line between arrogance and confidence. So that's a skill to really develop in yourself, is to be confident, but not to be arrogant. So if you're arrogant, you're actually, obviously, arrogance comes out of insecurity, and you need to be perceived as being better than, another person, or being the expert in the room, right? That's where the arrogance comes from. Well, you're giving up your power, you're giving up your sovereignty, because all of your energy is focused on being perceived in a certain way. You're being depleted by that.
Yeah.
That's where your power is going. Lack of concentration in a very similar way. You're being depleted, right? Because concentration gives you energy. If you concentration takes energy to develop, but then once you develop it, it gives you energy, right? That's the meditative, the way meditation works. That kind of the architecture of your body mind is such that you put energy into the practice, and then the practice gives you energy back, and it gives you 10 times as much energy as you put into it. But you have to engage in that kind of dynamic, that practice, in order to do that. So if you don't have that concentration, you've once again outsourced that focus or function to somebody else. All right.
Yeah.
All right. And then the final one is accepting what others say uncritically. Okay, you've now given up your power of discernment to somebody else and say, "Oh, I'm going to take that." It seems like you're, maintaining a certain kind of, okay, I'm not even going to engage with the world, so I'm just going to be myself, and I'm going to take what people say. And there's kind of an easefulness, like a path of least resistance, and that is what's going to give you independence. But it's just the opposite, right? You're actually giving up your power to externals and other people in order to control your life.
I think that the way you describe the fine line is really important, because there are certain, and you talk about arrogance is not that far off from confidence. And when you're an entrepreneur or CEO or something, you're running a company, you have to have confidence, but it does bleed over into arrogance. And I've been around guys that were kind of arrogant a little bit, but they were really good at their jobs and really good at running companies. And they sort of had that ego, which is not always great, but sometimes it helped them sort of plow through and build things. Of course, it could go too far and you could alienate people. And so you have to balance it out. The other one that I wanted to focus on was passivity, because I think that personally, this is a problem that I have. And you and I have talked about this, because I try and be calm and cool and Zen and, chill or whatever in the workplace. And I've been in certain situations, especially recently, where there's been some stuff that's going on with the employees and with partners that are really not cool. And I look back on it, and I was too passive for too long. I was just like, well, because I didn't want to create conflict. I wanted everybody to be happy, and all right, I'll just meditate and I'll chill out. And then it just festered, and this problem got worse. And then I actually lost it one day. And you helped me one day. You're like, listen, being Zen is not being calm all the time.
That's right. Yeah.
And so I think that you really helped me in that situation. And I finally let it out that it wasn't appropriate. But I realized that I had been passive for too long of a period. And that almost I was giving too much power to the other people in the situation. Right. And that created more long-term tension.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there are different business cultures, kind of support one or more of these in different ways. And I would say modern Western entrepreneurial capitalism actually makes it very hard to fall into any of these. You have to be concentrated. You can't really be dependent upon other people. You certainly can't be passive. You have to be have a bias to action such. If you do take what others say uncritically, the market's going to destroy you if it's not true. It really is. The competition is going to drive out the truth of your value, you could say, right? And if you're opportunistic, you may have some short-term success, but you're not going to have long-term success. So, but at certain other levels, like more entrenched companies, they can easily be subject to some of these, Coca-Cola, General Electric, in an entrenched, defense contractor, they can easily get arrogant. They can become passive. They can lack focus. I don't know how much of a lot of the modern things that are going wrong with products that are built by some of these companies have to do with all of those things, right? But they can be that way. there's, if you look at, say, like communist or socialist economies, they support others of these. There's the passivity in like a bureaucratic work culture is absolutely endemic.
Yeah.
Right. That's all sorts of power is being, there's all sorts of disempowerment in those types of jobs and roles. So
yeah. So let's talk about some positive characteristics.
let's do that.
Let's talk to that, because I think that and in your newsletter you talk about positive characteristics that arise from holding a true, honest, and confident seat in oneself. I really like that.
Yeah.
But you have, let's see, service, joyful action, independence of mind, humility. I love that one. Concentration and critical thinking. So how is it that we bring our independence leads to those positive characteristics?
I think I would maybe just turn that question around and just answer that by just turning it around and saying, by practicing these qualities, then we'll find our sovereignty and our emancipation and our independence of action.
Mm-hmm.
By practicing these things: service, joyful action, independence of mind, humility, concentration, and critical thinking.
I think that first of all, independence of mind is, I think, really critical in just in life in general. And I do think, getting back to our earlier point about outside forces, changing what we think about life, and the media certainly, and our environment and where we live has a lot to do with how we look at things. And you could go to a different part of the country and have totally different values and politics, of course, but you have to have an independent mind. I think that the more people like just follow along with the crowd, and just, it's not good, and it's not good for you personally and professionally. So how do you cultivate the independence of your mind on a daily basis?
Boy, that's a deep question. That's a really good question. We're in this moment, postmodern moment of the poly crisis and institutional breakdowns, and the breakdown of our media ecosystem, the breakdown of our epistemological ecosystem. What's true? How do we determine what's true? What are the perspectives? So it's a very powerful time. It's a great opportunity to move out of whatever within us has been reliant upon sources of truth, whether that's a creed or an ideology or a news source or a political figure or source or movement ideology. We have to, those are all being radically questioned, and each of us can radically question all of those. Now, the tendency is going to be to find our own little islands and then reinforce those. But if we maintain a kind of I think this is an important part. I'll bring the word in, multi-perspectival view. Be able to maintain multiple truths or multiple perspectives at the same time. That's what independence of mind is. It's not latching onto and closing down upon the truth of the matter, whatever the matter may be, but it's actually maintaining an open-mindedness. Independence of mind is open mind, so that you can take multiple perspectives and assess them and weigh them, and even hold them potentially in a kind of a creative tension for a period of time, where maybe both, two things that appear to be contradictory can actually both be true, and hold that tension for however long it takes.
Yeah. I think that the critical thinking part helps you with the concentration and independence of mind. And I think the more that the more that I read, the more I listen to you, and the more that I meditate and walk and exercise, that gives me time for critical thinking.
Yes.
When I have time for that, and I think about everything that's going on, good and bad, that leads to better concentration. That leads to service and joyful action.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think that's really a good part of the practice, and it's something that I'm constantly trying to get better at.
Yeah, really good. That you pointed out the connection between that independence of mind and critical thinking, and it's true. It's kind of like one way you could look at it is like the critical thinking is the no, and the open mindedness is the yes.
Nice.
Like there's that. Okay, that's maybe that. Yeah, let me entertain that notion. But the critical thinking can
Yeah.
also come in very powerfully with that. Okay, nope, that's not true. Nope, that's
Yeah.
not backed up.
Yeah.
Okay. And you're wielding both of those in a very dynamic, organic way.
I think that something else that happens, and this happens in personal and professional life, is I value people's opinions, pretty much everybody in the beginning, right?
Mhm.
But at some point, then you start to do some thinking about it, and maybe hindsight is, you look back and you're like, wow, I thought that person was a certain way, and then they weren't, or I thought
Mhm.
that business was going in some direction and it didn't. So what did I miss? And how did I miss something? Well, I think about it, and then next time something like that comes up, maybe I react differently. So I think it's like you stacking these experiences over time, and it really helps you deal with whatever might be coming next.
Yeah, you're stacking the experiences and you're building up your knowledge base, but you're also um, becoming more comfortable with not knowing. It goes kind of in both directions. Yeah, that the
Right.
open-mindedness has to also come, because what we usually do is that stack becomes the expertise, which actually closes down our mind.
Yeah.
So, like Einstein said, oh no, Suzuki Roshi said, in the beginner's mind, there's many possibilities. In the expert mind, there's few.
Love
And
that.
Einstein said, you can't solve a problem with the mindset that defined the problem, right? So we have to watch out for building up that expert mind as we. Yeah.
I love that quote. By the way, that's one book that I've reread a few times. Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind is really a classic, and highly recommend it to anyone out there. I want to also talk about the balance between outward humility and inner confidence. And this is something that I've struggled with and I've worked on. I've gotten better at it. I really want to be humble and always like that. But I used to give a lot more weight to other people's opinion than my own. And so
Yeah.
I've tried to develop over time inner confidence, but outward humility. And so talk about the balance there, and how do you approach that?
Yes, right. You could say that arrogance and confidence are kind of on a polarity, in that arrogance is sort of the excessive or the shadow of confidence, and humility is in a yeah, it's a good question. I want to kind of give it a good frame, because we can also be falsely humble, right? So there's true humility, which is really showing that we are um not in control. Okay, a real humility in the face of higher powers, conditions greater than ourselves, the consequences of karma across the board, whether it's our own or other people's or the collective, right? That humility in the face of that, and then we can sort of pretend that we're that way, but really inside we're kind of holding on to our position of control and power,
Yeah.
right? That's kind of
Yeah.
self-control. So there's a virtue signaling that people can do, and you find this a lot in spiritual communities, that kind of pretending. In fact, there's a Zen teacher who said, don't be uh don't act so humble, you're not that good.
I love
Because he
that.
saw his own students, with that
Right.
little layer, like that it wasn't authentic humility. Yeah.
That's a great quote.
So, your question is a really good one. It's like that relationship, because ultimately, if you truly are humble, then you're actually in right relation with the universe. Like, you truly see that you're not in control, and that there are greater forces at
Yeah.
play.
Yeah.
And there's spirit at play, Buddha nature, and the bodhisattvas are much more powerful than our egoic self is.
Hmm.
and we don't have control ever, right?
Yeah.
So if we're truly in that place, we can confidently really be in touch with what our true power is. And we
Yeah.
are immensely powerful. The power of our heart, the power of our creativity, the power of our minds. We can have so much influence, over people, when we smile at people every day, and the way we can help people with
Yeah.
with our work, we do have immense power. And our confidence should come from there, not from this kind of arrogant presentation of being on top of everything or knowing
Yeah.
everything. Yeah.
I also think a lot about mindfulness and staying in the present moment and not beating myself up over past decisions, not obsessing over what's going to happen in the future, because I do think that leads to humility as well. And it
Yeah.
also that's also critical thinking. I sometimes replay things that happen that in the past, I'm like, well, I should have said this or I should have done that. And that's not really, it's good to think about those things and evaluate what went down, but it's also not good to spend too much time on it because it's in the past. And
Hmm.
now I come back to the present moment and think about how do I carry myself today and through this podcast and through my work meetings and things like that. And I think that staying mindful and in the present moment and meditating on this stuff, it
Right.
really does help keep everything into perspective.
Yeah. 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 It really does. The arrogance and false humility can reinforce themselves, those
Yeah.
two shadow forces, but true
Yeah.
humility and true confidence also reinforce each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I will. One other thing about our independence as a country, I think about this sometimes that we have a lot of issues in our country, and we could change a lot of things, and there's a lot of criticism about this or that, and they're all valid. But at the same time, we're only 249 years old, and we're still a work in progress,
Yeah.
and we don't have a perfect anything, but we can get better. And part of
Mhm.
it is working on yourself and working with your community. And I like, the Sangha that you've created. And I think there's a lot of ways to move forward here and become better people and a better country actually over time.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like politics follows culture, follows individual kind of
Yeah.
awakening and deepening. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Great stuff, Paul. Well, thank you everybody for listening today. I will remind everyone to check out Paul's newsletter on Substack, Zen at Work. Also, our last episode, we talked about a really exciting new project called One Body Sangha that Paul has created, an online community. I actually attended one of the Dharma talks last week and it was excellent. And so check it out, and to learn more, contact Paul, and appreciate everyone's time today. Any final words from you today?
Oh, thank you everybody for listening. I hope this was helpful, and it's good to spend time with you, Scott. May
That's
may
always.
your days be full of freedom and joy.
Thanks, buddy. You too. We'll talk to everybody soon. Have a great day.
Thank you for joining us on this exploration into Zen Buddhism and its transformative influence on work and life. We hope you'll subscribe, share, and comment wherever you get your podcasts. May your journey be one of continuous growth and mindful living. From all of us here at Game of Zen, wishing you peace and prosperity on your path ahead.